Welcome to Reframe Your Mindset for Success. With me today is Dre. How are you today, Dre?
I'm doing excellent, Paul. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. And what have you been up to this week?
Working as usual.
Yeah.
Building out stuff for our execution reliability, index, dashboards, scorecards, etc. And then the usual work, some interviews like this one, and going to the gym, living life.
Getting the gym and living life too. Sounds pretty good. Okay. So just before we get into the big idea then, Dre, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? So I know obviously, you used to play basketball, but can you give us a little bit of insight into, your background and how you've got to where you got to now?
Always played sports growing up. Got around to basketball around age 14, which is pretty late if you're trying to play in college, let alone at the professional level. Only played 1 year in high school. Didn't do much that 1 year I played. Had to walk on and play college ball, and it was at the Division III level, which is not a level that produces professional level players. So nobody was checking for me to play at the pro level either. So I had to sell myself into an opportunity to play pro ball. And I was able to do that. Started what became a nearly decade long career playing internationally for, as I said, nearly 10 years, mostly over in Europe. And at the same time, I started publishing content to this new website called YouTube. And my playing career started in 2005. So this
Wow.
is right when YouTube came out. And I wasn't doing it because I was trying to get myself known on the internet. It was because I just had footage of myself playing it and I just wanted to see what it looked like. And if I looked how I thought I looked on the court.
Yeah.
But players started seeing the videos and asking questions. So I just started taking my little camera with me to the gym. This is before we had cameras on our phones, video cameras, that is. I
Yeah.
was just taking to the gym and record my workouts. And I started putting them on YouTube, built an audience doing that. And by about 2009, 2010, I was doing it intentionally. I was going to the gym, like literally thinking about what I'm going to be recording, knowing that I would be recording. So that's
Yeah.
how I started to build the brand. Around that same time, 2009 through 2011,
Yeah.
I started talking about mindset. And that's when an audience of people who didn't play sports started to find me. And that's how I knew what would be my segue from sports to where we are today, because people who didn't play sports liked the mental aspect that I was pulling from my sporting experience and teaching it to people who were in business. And I kept playing ball till 2015. Then I stopped playing about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And for the last 10 years, I've really just been helping professionals and entrepreneurs with structured execution. And that's what we do.
Okay, great stuff. Great story too. So, and I know you talked about mindset there, and what we're really going to focus on today is around the discipline. So, if we think about the big idea that you bring in the table today, how would you describe the big idea? What is this thing about discipline that you're going to talk about?
Well, discipline, a lot of people look at it as a personality trait when it really is not. What discipline is a byproduct of following a structure. If you follow a structure and you execute on that structure, then your behavior is disciplined and you appear to be a quote unquote disciplined person to the outside observer. So that's the big idea for people to understand that discipline is not something that you either are or aren't. It's a
Yeah.
byproduct of your behavior.
Okay. So why do so many people then resist discipline? Even though they know that they need it.
A great question. It's because everybody knows they need discipline. You ask 100 people on the street, they'll all say yes in some aspect of their lives. The challenge is discipline doesn't always feel good. Now,
Yeah.
most people also say that they need or want confidence,
Yeah.
but most people are happy about confidence and confidence feels good. Discipline doesn't always feel good because discipline means following a set of rules or operations under consequence. That's what discipline is. And
Yeah.
that under consequence part is the hard part because it means if you do not comply and or do what you're supposed to do, there's going to be a penalty. There's going to be some pushback on you for that. And it's immediate and it's consistent. That's the part that a lot of people don't like because discipline does not give you an option to
Yeah.
not do what you're supposed to do. And most people, when
Yeah.
motivated, when excited, when things
Yeah.
are working, are okay with everything that discipline entails. But when you're not motivated, not excited, and you don't feel like doing your job, that's when discipline becomes a boogeyman because you don't want to deal with it because
Don't want to do it.
discipline, again,
Yeah.
discipline, the bills always come due when you're dealing with discipline. But confidence is optional. And
Yeah.
again, confidence feels good. Different discipline doesn't always feel good.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? Because I think about confidence, and I think, confidence for me, in some respects, relates to skill as well. If we talk about sports, I think, your sport was basketball. I played what be soccer in the US or football, and you go when you know you've got a certain level of skill, you have a certain level of confidence. So that's about
Right.
belief as well, isn't it? Right? Whereas discipline, you're quite right, is that if I think, well, for some people, it's about comfort zones, isn't it? It's so easy to stay in the comfort zone because, if you want to be in the best shape of your life, you've got to apply a certain amount of discipline, which might mean you've got to get up early in the morning and do some training, right? Some people don't want to do that, do they? They want to stay in bed. And so discipline in itself, you go, well, there's always going to be a massive benefit to it. But if you're not disciplined, there's always going to be a big consequence as well. Would you agree?
Yes, that's the whole point because discipline is about executing under consequence. Whereas, again, that consequence is the part that forces the behavior to happen. And confidence is a byproduct of discipline. If
Right.
you do the work consistently, then you believe in your ability to do it. And then you
Yeah.
go out there and you perform.
Right. With you. Okay. So if you're disciplined, yeah, it builds confidence, right? So
That's
what's
right.
what's the difference between motivation and discipline then?
Well, motivation is kind of like a weekend guest, whereas discipline is a permanent resident.
Right.
Motivation shows up when it feels like it. It
Yeah.
sometimes is there, and sometimes it's not. Like
Yeah.
for either of us, Paul, some days you are very motivated to do your job. When you
Yeah.
played a sport, there were days that you were motivated to go to the field, to the pitch, and do your workouts and your trainings and the games. And there were some days you didn't feel like it, but there was a practice on the schedule. You still had to show up and do
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
practice. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on the team. So discipline is about showing up and doing your work regardless of feelings. Feelings do not have a say in the matter when you're disciplined. When
Yeah.
you're dealing only in motivation, then how you feel is the entirety of whether you do the job or not. The
Yeah.
challenge with motivation and the weakness of motivation is that human beings go through a wide range of feelings. We go through a wide range of emotions. Some
Yeah.
days we feel great, some days not so great. Some days we don't feel anything. But
Yeah.
we can't base professional work on something as fickle as feelings and emotions because they are not consistent.
Yeah.
But following a structure or a system under consequence is consistent because the process is the same over and over again. And the corrections for non-compliance are the same every single time. That's why you can build a career on discipline. You cannot build a career on motivation.
Right. That's such an interesting point. And I know obviously we've just been talking about sports. I look at it and go, when you have that structure and you go, so you go into training 3 times a week, you're playing a match as an example. So it
Mhm.
gets you there because you go, and don't get me wrong, you could go, I'm not motivated today, I'm not going to go to training. But for a lot of people, they still turn up. I do with the kids, I take the kids to football and you
Mhm.
go, and they are, and I look at my kids and I go, when I think about it now, it's not about them being so motivated. It's the disciplined because they turn up over and over again. So I do think that that's a great point that you make there. So if we look at it then, so how does discipline create confidence and self-belief then?
Well, discipline is showing up consistently and doing your job, is following a system under consequence on a consistent basis. So if you're doing the work consistently, and you notice well, Paul, you played a sport, and anybody who's a professional, what they do, you practice a lot before you practice before you play. So if
Yeah,
you're a trial attorney, you do a lot of practicing of what that trial is going to be like before you actually show up to the courtroom. If you're a salesperson, you practice your sales presentation. If you're a speaker, you practice your speech. So the practice, the discipline is doing the practice consistently, even when you don't feel great about practicing, you still practice. Then when you get into the game, you have the belief that you can do it because confidence is a belief in your ability to do something. That's the definition of the term. So where
yeah,
does the belief come from? The belief comes from knowing that you did the work.
yeah,
Over here, we call it doing your homework. And I
yeah.
tell professionals that people think their homework ended when they graduated from school. No, homework started when you graduated from school
Keep
because you do
going.
the work ahead of time, right, as a professional. So when you get into the situation, you have a high level of belief in your ability to do the thing because you know you've already done the work. So and when you get to the performance time in
Yeah,
sports, that's the game. In business, it can be the presentation, whatever it is.
yeah.
You have already sealed the deal. The work has already been done. All you're doing is putting it on display for everybody else who wasn't there when you were doing the work in the dark. Now they get to see it in the light. So this is how discipline leads to confidence, and that confidence leads to performance, the performance to the outcomes.
Okay, and that makes an awful lot of sense, and it's interesting because I've heard, and I don't know if it was Roger Federer who was talking about the when you think about it as a child, most people can learn how to play something. He learned to play tennis, and actually, it wasn't the fact that he was a natural tennis player. It's just the fact that he's practiced and played all of his life, and that takes discipline to be able to do that. So what separates high performers who sustain success from those who burn and fade away?
That's a great question. It could be several factors. One of them is the willingness to stick to the process and stick to the system,
Yeah,
even when things appear to not quite be working, because there's no professional, even people noted for their success out there who just had it, they got to the top and they just had this run of success where there was never a challenge, nothing ever went wrong. Even the best performers out there have had times when things go wrong. You
yeah,
get injured, you may lose a game that you didn't think you were going to lose, you may miss a sale, there may be a downturn in your industry or in your business. Things happen, and mental toughness comes into play here.
yeah,
Mental toughness is your willingness and ability to stick to the process, even though sticking to the process, at least right now, is not producing the results that you have expected. And a lot of people will quit at that time when the results are not showing up because they say, well, I'm doing all the quote unquote right things,
yeah,
but I'm not getting the right results. So they start to think that either they're doing the wrong thing, period, they're in the wrong job, or something is wrong with them personally,
yeah,
or something's wrong with the process. When
yeah,
the reality is, it may be none of the above.
yeah,
Sometimes things just happen. We don't control outcomes in life. We like to feel like we control outcomes,
yeah,
especially as high performers. We like to feel like we can control outcomes. Most of the time, we really don't. What
yeah,
we control is the execution of the system, and
yeah,
we trust that the system is designed to more likely than not, more often than not, produce a positive result, depending on what we're doing. So if you think of someone playing like American baseball,
yeah,
if you get on base 3 times out of 10, you're doing great, right? You get into the
yeah,
Hall of Fame. That's
yeah,
being a 300 hitter. In
yeah,
basketball, a really good player might make 40 to 50% of their shots.
yeah,
In sales, a good salesperson, depending on the industry that you're in, you may have a 20% close rate. You could be a superstar. In
yeah,
other industries, maybe it's 80%. But the
yeah,
reality is that your system is designed that, again, with some level of likelihood, you're going to hit the number that makes the most sense for your system and your industry to be successful. Doesn't mean it's going to be successful every time. Because again, what industry are you in? What are you doing? Who are you going against? What is your competition? And what is the expectation? So the reason a lot of people can't stick around, even when they start out with success, is that that success doesn't always just become this smooth ride down the yellow brick road of success once you get there. There are going to be
yeah.
challenges, there are going to be setbacks. What do you do when you hit those? That's really what determines who stays versus who leaves.
Do you know that's really interesting? It's such a piece around mindset and mental toughness, as you say, because there's such a thing as what they call the plateau of latent potential. And the plateau of latent
Mhm.
potential is when somebody's learning a new skill. So, say for example, I've done this by the way, where you're learning guitar, right? So, learning
Yeah.
guitar is the new skill, and somebody tries to learn it. And you think about some of the greatest guitarists that have ever lived. It's because of all the things that you taught about discipline, practice. They kept going. But what this latent of that this plateau latent potential says is that for a lot of people, the reason that they give up is because they don't see the results that they're expecting, even though they're putting a little bit of discipline and practice in. And because they don't see the results, there's a level of it's about mindset, it's about mental toughness. And so they give up, right? And you go, actually,
Right.
if they'd just gone a little bit further, then actually that's when they would have started to see the results, massively seeing results. And you go to it's something called the plateau of latent potential. And also interesting, just linking to what you just said, and going back to Roger Federer, is what he said is he only wins something like 51 or 52% of his points, which means that he loses the other 48%, right, from a tennis perspective. And you
Mhm.
go, but it's the mental toughness, it's that mindset to know that he's got the edge. It's exactly what you're talking about, the discipline, the practice that gets in there. So, just moving on from there, then. So, how can professionals build discipline while balancing the likes of, we've got careers, we've got family, we've got personal responsibilities. So, how do you build discipline when you've got those things going on?
Well, the ideal way to do it is to plug into systems and structures in every one of those areas. So you can have a system and a structure for your family, for your fitness, for your finances, for your work, for your everything else, whatever you have going on, is
Yeah,
have a system and a structure for how you do things. And that doesn't mean that every single minute has to be regimented because, I mean, if you have kids, for example, or you're spending time with your significant other, you may not always have a plan or a schedule of what you're going to do, but you can say, hey, every Saturday, the whole day is for me to spend with my daughter. Or every Thursday night, I'm going to go on a date with my husband or wife, or whatever the situation is. But
yeah,
you can still put structure into place so that things become a lot more predictable, but you can also have spontaneity within the predictableness.
yeah,
So The biggest thing, if someone wants to be more disciplined, is you need to be following a structure or a system, because a structure or a system is duplicatable, repeatable, and predictable.
Yeah.
And if you're following that, then discipline naturally has to result.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting again, just to build on that because I find some people who talk about, and I'm not a procrastinator basically. I tend to just do things, get things done. But a lot of people
Right.
talk to me sometimes about procrastination. You go, well, actually, if you procrastinate, a lot of that's just to do with discipline. But with that, it's also
Mhm.
sometimes about having the right structure in place and doing
Right.
things when you say you're going to do them, right? But some people still continue to procrastinate. Um,
Yeah. But,
so just out of interest then, because this is a big question for me, right? Because there's so many
mhm.
talented people. We see talented sports people, business people, but often they actually underperform despite having that ability and the opportunity. So, why does that happen? Just out of interest, do you think?
When people who have the ability don't perform.
Yeah. Because we see sometimes you see people who've got real ability. You can see, I've seen
Mhm.
sports people over the years, you talk about basketball, baseball, I talk about football. I've seen footballers and you go, actually, maybe if they applied themselves a bit more, they could have been a lot more successful than what they were. So why do you think that happens? Is that just purely down to discipline itself?
It could be a lot more than just discipline. I mean, we could have a whole conversation just on that alone, Paul, as why
Yeah,
it's highly capable people do not perform.
yeah,
One reason that's relative to what we've been talking about here is because there's no consequence to underperformance. There
right.
are some environments out there where if you don't perform, there is immediate correction and there is immediate consequence. The military comes to mind.
Yeah,
There are some industries out there where if you don't perform, there
yeah,
is an immediate response. Like there's a guy who ran an inbound sales company once, and his system was set up such that they believed with 75% probability that every inbound call that came in, whoever was working in the call center, that would probably lead to setting an appointment. 75% likelihood. So he
yeah,
would tell any new hire who came into the sales room that we play baseball around here. And what that means is if you take 3 consecutive calls and you do not book at least one appointment, you're fired. Why?
wow,
Because the probability was, again, 75%. Three
yeah,
out of every 4 calls should end in an appointment. So if you do 3 straight and get no appointments, you're doing something wrong. You're
yeah,
probably not following our system, which means you're fired. So we're not even going to try to figure out what the issue is. And everyone knew that was the rule.
yeah,
And guess what? Very seldom did they have to fire anybody because everybody followed the system and the system
yeah,
was
yeah,
already proven.
yeah,
So in environments where there is no consequence, human beings naturally will drift. This is just human nature. People drift when
yeah,
there is no consequence,
yeah,
even high performers and highly capable people.
yeah,
Now, Paul, there are some people that are, and I'm sure there are some listening to this, who are exceptional individuals, high performers, internally, intrinsically driven people who
yeah,
do a good job just because it's part of their identity to do a good job.
yeah,
And those people do exist. The issue is the more people you add to a team or to an organization, the less likely that everyone is going to be that. Why? Because there are not enough of those people walking around the earth for you to fill your entire organization with them. All right,
yeah,
you may have a few,
yeah,
but everybody's not going to be like them. And one challenge I noticed working with organizations is
yeah,
that they will point out. I was working with an insurance company once, and they would point out to me, Dre, we have a system. We pay for all the leads. We spend $100,000 a month on inbound leads.
yeah,
All these people have to do is follow our system, and they'll make 2 sales a day, and everybody's going to make money, and our company will grow. The
yeah,
issue is only about 20% of our people are actually doing that, and the rest of them are not doing it.
right,
Dre, we need you to give them something so that they can, we can get the other 80% to catch up to the 20%.
yeah,
And the reality is that those 20% are often the intrinsically driven people who will do a good job no matter where you put them. They can work in any industry, they're going to do a good job because of who they are.
yeah,
For everybody else, the other 80% of the population, the system must be tight enough that they don't have a choice but to be what we would define as a high performer in industry. So that's one thing. I'll give you one more is that the question is why people who are highly capable don't perform is
yeah,
that sometimes they just don't want to perform. They have the potential, but that doesn't mean that they want to do it.
yeah,
Somebody can have a lot of potential in a certain space, but never really pan out, so to speak, in that space because they don't want to be that thing. And I'm sure you saw this, Paul. You have a background in sports.
yeah,
In sports, how often do you see a parent who maybe had played the sport, or maybe they didn't play as well as they wanted to? They have a child, and
yeah,
now they want their child to live out what the parent didn't do.
yeah,
The issue is the kid doesn't really want to play the sport.
Yeah.
And I told you I have a background on YouTube putting out videos for basketball. I can't tell you how many messages I got, emails, DMs from young men and women
Yeah.
who were being pushed into a sport. And it wasn't always basketball. Sometimes it'd be figure skating,
Yeah.
beauty pageants, believe it or not,
Yeah.
horseback riding, soccer,
Yeah.
hockey, basketball, because their parents wanted them to make it, quote unquote, in a sport, but they didn't really want to play the sport.
Yeah.
So it also, you got to ask yourself, what does this person actually want? And as a leader, and I mostly work with leaders in organizations, business owners or leaders in like corporate positions,
Yeah.
you need to know what the people on your team actually want, because what they want and what you want are not often the same thing. So you have to know, who are
Yeah.
you dealing with?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I'm just going to go back one step, and only because I've got four kids, so two girls and two young boys, and so
Mm,
both of my boys play soccer, football, and
mm,
I've never been the because I've played football all my life, right? So I've never been the type of parents who they've had to play and they've found it themselves,
right.
and I've encouraged them. But my viewpoint is with kids is they need to enjoy it, right? And if they're not enjoying it and they don't want to play, they don't have to play. It's as simple as that, right? And by being that type of parent, my boys are very, very disciplined and they enjoy playing and they've got that from that inner motivation, discipline themselves, and they apply that. And I think by just stepping back as a parent and letting them grow and letting, all you have to do is support them. But I do know what you're talking about because when I'm there, sometimes you see other parents that are shouting and screaming and you're like, geez, just take a step back, take the pressure off your child. So it's a real interesting point that you made there, only because I'm living in an experience in that at this moment in time with my kids. Coming back around then to leadership, because leadership is something that I'm very passionate about. It's something that I specialize in, and you just made a really good point there. So when it comes to you're working with organizations, and when it comes to obviously some organizations coming to you because the example you've just given us is they're not performing, and you've gone in and maybe applied a structure. When you think about leadership, in this day and age, especially with everything that's going on,
Mm.
what are you seeing? What are you feeling from a leadership perspective? What are leaders lacking? What do leaders need? What would you say that was from your observation?
Well, I say there are universal principles of leadership that are necessary no matter what's going on. And as long
Yeah,
as human beings are human, which I think is not changing, at least as far as we know, current science,
yeah,
that certain things about leadership are always going to be true, and that people follow the energy of the leader. So, however the leader shows up, is how the rest of the team is going to show up. So, the leader has to have the belief, the leader has to be certain, the leader has to not command, but communicate with conviction.
yeah,
Even when the leader is actually unsure, you can't show that unsureness because it's going to trickle down through the rest of your organization.
yeah,
Secondly, a leader they have to have the people on their team feel that the leader cares about what you want, where you're going, and why you're there.
yeah,
If the people on your team don't feel like you care about them as people on some level, or at least about their goals on some level, then they're not going to give their best to you. They might show up and do their job, but they're not going to go above the bare minimum requirements.
yeah,
Why? Because they say, okay, the job is going to pay me the bare minimum to keep me from quitting. I'm going to do the bare minimum to keep the job from firing me.
yeah,
So, as a leader, your job is to make sure that people on your team know that you or someone in leadership, depending on the size of your organization, you got 300 people, maybe you can't talk to all of them, but someone in leadership needs to know that this rank and file person, all right, this is what they want. Here's why they're here.
yeah,
Here's how we are helping them get to where they want to be. Because some
yeah,
people are at the job for the money and they just
yeah,
want to make as much money as possible. Some people are at the job for the connections and the relationships that they can build, the friends that they work with.
yeah,
Some people are there because they want to go on a personal growth journey and get better.
yeah,
Some people want to advance in a company and become part of leadership.
yeah,
But if you don't know why they're there,
yeah,
and you treat them as if their goal is money when their actual goal is growth, or their goal is relationships when their actual goal is I want to move up in the company. Well, there's a misalignment there, and those people usually end up leaving because what they want is not what the company, that's not how the company is dealing with them. So a
yeah,
leader's job is you need to have your fingers, so to speak, on the pulse of your organization as a whole, but
yeah,
also every individual on the team on some level needs to feel like they matter. And the
yeah,
number one reason that people leave jobs is not due to a lack of money, even though most leaders and business owners tend to think that, okay, well, if I want my people to stay, I just got to give them more money. But that's not the reality. Most people leave organizations because they feel like what they're doing doesn't matter. or that they don't matter,
Yeah.
regardless of the money.
Yeah.
So that's what the leaders need to understand. Leadership is a people job, is not a
Yeah.
charts and data job.
Yeah, it's true that I think there's a study by Gallup, and they basically say that the reason that people leave, 50% of people leave because of the manager, and it's about how the manager made them feel. And
Exactly.
you also look and think, some of the things that you just mentioned there, a lot of it's about trust as well. But
Hmm.
very famous American football coach, Lou Holtz, he actually said that when it comes to leadership, when it comes to relationships, there's three questions that people ask of you if you manage them and lead them. And it's, can I trust you? Do you care? And are you committed to me? And all of those three is kind of what you've just been talking about. And if you have a no to any of those, then that's where a person's going to feel undervalued or devalued, or they're not going to feel trusted. So the psychological safety is not there. But when you think about then, because you've got to get this balance right of being focused on what they want in an organization, so their career and where they want to go, and understanding them, and obviously listening to them, developing them. At the same time, we want them to perform though. So you've got to get the balance right in organizations of, there's got to be performance standards, but there's also got to be, and what I call a career focus, because we should be focused on their career and making it individualistic. How do you get that balance right? Do you think is that about discipline in organizations? Is there a way that you recommend getting that right when you work with organizations?
Yeah, there has to be a structure to it. So what you just said is exactly the point. So let's just say you have are we talking bigger teams or smaller teams here?
Well, I guess, big and small, we're talking about
Okay.
organizations. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's say it's a smaller team. Let's say you have 10 people on your team and you're the leader. You can know who each of those 10 people are. You know their names, you know their spouses, you know their kids, you know their faces, they know you, they can come to your office. Now, if you have 1,000 people on your team, you can't do that. So you have other people, lieutenants who are in leadership on your behalf.
Yeah.
But either way, structurally, the organization, when someone joins and onboards into your team, there needs to be a conversation where you find out, okay, why do you really want this job? What do you want from this? And this can happen in the interview process as well. But once the person is in, what do you want to get out of this? Are you trying to move up? And what's your priority? Move up in the company, make more money, personal growth? Are you looking to win friends and build relationships? It could be all of those, but I want to know the order. What's the priority? What do you really want to get? When I, as the leader, understand that about you, now I know, okay, here's how I can explain to you why I need you to make 10 extra phone calls.
Yeah.
Now I know how to tailor the conversation about why I may want you to work overtime. I'll pay you for it, but why I need you to come and do some extra work. Why I need you to do this thing that you may not be keen on doing. Because now I know what you're looking for. I just have to make sure that I'm tailoring that conversation properly based on who you are as a person. Now, let's say I have a 1,000-person organization and I'm walking past people in the hallway who I don't even know who they are, but they work for me and they're on the payroll. So
Yeah.
one of my lieutenants, one of my other leaders, they need to know who that person is. So they are not a nameless faceless person to everybody. And I need to know, what are you looking to get out of this? And again, the job of the leader is you have to be able to calibrate your conversation to the desires of the person that you're talking to. And when a person feels like they matter and that you care about who they are, not just what you need out of them, they will give extra. They will go the extra mile for you because they believe that you give a damn about their existence as a human being. And what happens in organizations is often happens in not in small organizations. Sometimes it does, but often this happens in large organizations. The bigger they get and the more bloated they get, is that the people working there start to feel as if they are numbers and not people. And
Yeah.
when people feel like they're numbers, they will do the bare minimum that is required of them, but they will not do any more than that. And you often end up having a whole lot of turnover. And anybody who knows anything about organizations knows that turnover is more costly than retention,
Yeah.
whether that comes to the customers or the staff. So what you want to do is maintain what you have.
Absolutely. And it is. I mean, to me, what you've just explained, you think about the way the world's changing, and we've got the onset of AI and everything that's changing technologically, is
Right.
that it really is about human-centered leadership. It's never been more important to be, and that what you just explained to me is about being human at the end of the day, because you're actually
Mhm.
showing a level of empathy, a level of caring, level of understanding, level of tailoring what you do as a leader to the individuals that work for you. So that makes absolute sense to me completely. So on the basis of, I know, right, you've published a lot of books, right? So for you to be able to do that, you obviously have a lot of discipline in your life. So I guess I've got a couple of questions there. The first question is, has there been a time when you've lacked discipline? And maybe in the early days where you lack discipline, and how did you get yourself from a lack of discipline, lack of motivation, lack of, structure in your life at the time to where you are now? That would be the first question.
That's a good question. I'm trying to think of a time in my life when I lacked discipline. Maybe in college, I didn't really go to class that often. I did as much as I needed to graduate,
Yeah,
and tried to not buy the textbooks and get by. And I did. I graduated, but that was intentional lack of discipline. So it wasn't like I was coming up short and I wanted to come up full. So that's kind of a cheating. So I won't use that one. Later on, I would say maybe around 2008, 2009, when I was still playing basketball. I might have been in between jobs, and I would show up to the gym kind of at random times, different times, because it didn't matter what time I got to the gym. The gym was always available for me to use, the basketball gym, that is. And I remember what changed for me was that there was a summer camp that was going to happen at the gym because it was owned by the city. And the women who worked at the front desk said, well, there's going to be a summer camp starting here, and it's going to be at 7 o'clock every morning. It goes from 7 o'clock to like 5 o'clock every day. And I'm like, damn, that interrupts my workout time. And they're going to use the same part of the gym that I would do basketball at. So now this is like really interrupting me.
yeah,
So I figured though that the gym opened at 6 o'clock, Paul. So if I get there at 6 o'clock, I can get a workout in between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. and get out of there before the summer camp starts, which is exactly what I did for that entire summer. And
right.
that's when I really locked into waking up early in the morning, which I still do to this very day.
Yeah,
Get up early in the morning. First thing I do is get the workout in because the situation forced me into structure.
yeah,
But before that, since there was nothing forcing me, I was drifting. I was still working out, but I was drifting, and there
yeah,
was no organization and structure to it. But once the organization was forced upon me, I just kept it, and I realized that I like this. This actually works because I got into a bit of a rhythm with it, and
yeah.
that's how I stuck with it. So besides that, no, there hasn't been a time when I was not disciplined, not structured.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know earlier you talked about as well, because for some people are more extrinsically motivated, some people are more intrinsically motivated. But I love the way that you
Mhm.
talked about if you apply discipline, it's more powerful than motivation, which you mentioned earlier. So here we go then. So you published a large number of books, right? So for the person who is looking to attempt to write their first, I've published some books as well, right? So we've both done that. We've both got past that hurdle of writing the first book. So, but what would be the advice that you'd give to somebody who is writing the first book, just out of interest? Because I know a lot of people want to do it, but struggle with either getting around to it or getting to it, or think of writing a book such a big thing that they don't get there.
Well, the biggest challenge I see with people telling me about writing books is that they have not actually written the manuscript, what it's going to be. So people's challenge is not getting the cover design or the edit or putting a book on Amazon or getting a printed copy. It's the actual writing.
Yeah,
So the solution is twofold. One is Microsoft Word, the other one is Google Docs. All right, sit down and actually write the book. All right,
yeah,
that's the biggest thing that most people don't do. The good thing about the world that we're in today for people who like to talk but might not be so great or keen at writing is you can use talk to text. Turn the
yeah,
microphone, just say what you want to say, let it spit it all out, and then you go through and do the editing. But the biggest thing is you need to actually buckle down and write. Now, how do you do that? Is you need to put time on your calendar, make
yeah,
appointments with yourself and your writing the same way that we had an appointment to have this conversation right here. We didn't just randomly decide this. We scheduled it. We knew the day, we knew the time, we knew the link, and now here we are having a conversation. So it's the same thing that I say to especially people I know who are in service businesses. You have appointments with your clients. Okay, you don't just no show to the appointment. You don't show up when you feel like it. You don't not show and say, "Well, I'll do it tomorrow." You can't do that with a client because they'll fire you. All right,
yeah.
don't do it to yourself. Set the schedule, set the appointment, and show up at the time that you said you're going to show up, and show yourself the same respect that you show to your clients, your bosses, and anybody else you work with.
Makes absolute sense. And somebody once said to me is, and this is about discipline and structure, right? If you write a
Mhm.
page every day, by the end of the year, you'd have a 365-page book. So that's another way of thinking about it, but that's applying discipline every day, isn't it? So, great advice again, by the way. So
Yeah.
bringing this to a close then. I mean, obviously the listener's been, really will focus in on the idea of discipline and structure, on this episode. What would be the last piece of advice then that you'd give to the listener just to close off this particular episode?
Following through on structure is a byproduct of personal principle. So above principle, upstream from principle, I mean, excuse me, upstream from structure is principle. Your
Yeah,
principles, meaning what you're about, what's etched in stone, what you will never change, these are identity level and they are non-negotiable. When your principles are clear, then the structures become obvious. Because if your principle is, one of my principles is I stopped playing basketball in 2015. I still work out every single day because
yeah,
one of my personal principles is I want to be in the shape of an athlete to where someone who doesn't know me, if they saw me, it's hard to tell when I'm sitting here in a suit, but when I'm in casual gear, people
yeah,
look at me and say, this guy looks like an athlete. And one of my principles is I'm always going to look like an athlete as long as I'm physically capable of moving around. That is a principle of mine.
yeah,
And because of that, I structure my life such that I have to go to the gym. I have to work out every single day because it reflects my identity. And
yeah,
because of that structure, my behavior is disciplined. And because of the discipline, I'm confident. The confidence leads to performance. The performance leads to results. And results lead to rewards. That's the process. In that order, everything that I just said. So the one thing that I would leave everybody here with is with all this stuff we talked about specifically around discipline and structure, you need to go one step above both of those and ask yourself, what are your personal principles? These are things that never break. They are not optional. They are not desires. They are not suggestions, and they are not wants. These are etched in stone. They do not change. They may not be violated. And if they are violated, you're not who you say you are. And there must be an immediate fix for a principle violation.
yeah.
And most human beings, Paul, are not clear on their personal principles,
It
which
really
is why following a structure and thus becoming disciplined is always a challenge for them.
Yeah, that's an excellent way to close. And I massively believe it in some respects in what you said about your own principles. It's about respecting yourself, and if you can respect
That's
yourself,
right.
love yourself, then you can respect and love other people as well. So,
That's right.
Dre, it's been brilliant having you on the podcast show today. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights. So, thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you for having me on, Paul. I appreciate you sharing your platform.